The Mother's Rosario arc is widely considered to be the best part of Sword Art Online. You hear it all the time. This is the arc that fixes everything. This is where Sword Art Online finally gets good. This arc will change your mind. So naturally, the question is that actually true? Is this the arc that is going to warm my cold, cynical heart? Is this the moment where I finally see the error of my ways, apologize to the writer, and declare myself a proud Sword Art Online fan? Well, you should have seen the title, so you already know the answer is a resounding no. Not a maybe, not a, well, some parts of it. A full, confident, no hesitation, absolutely not. This arc, just like every other arc in Sword Art Online, is also terrible. Not the same kind of terrible, mind you. Oh no, that would require consistency. This arc is terrible in brand new, exciting ways. Fresh mistakes, creative failures, a whole new flavor of bad. But at the end of the day, when all is said and done, when the tears are wiped away and the violins stop playing, the conclusion is still the same. It is not good. Different reasons. Same result. If you thought I was magically going to do a 180 and suddenly become a fan of this show, then you do not know me very well. This is still the same old Sword Art Online. It does not inspire growth or reflection. It inspires confusion, frustration, and a growing sense that I am wasting my time. I am not a fan of Sword Art Online. I never was, and I never will be. Nothing about this arc, or any arc for that matter, is going to change that. There is no redemption moment coming. There is no sudden realization where I finally see the light and join the fans. That is not happening. In fact, the only thing I dislike more than Sword Art Online itself is the Sword Art Online fanbase. The blind praise, the excuses, the constant lowering of standards just to defend bad writing. I want no part of that. I would never join them. I would rather stay cynical and honest than pretend this mess is somehow good just because it made someone emotional. I genuinely have no idea how anyone can say this arc is good. At this point, there are only two possibilities. Either they are completely delusional or they are trolling and having a laugh at everyone else. There is no third option. This arc is infuriatingly bad, and I am going to tear it apart just like the previous arcs. If you thought I was going to pull my punches just because of the themes this arc deals with, then you were mistaken. This arc has the emotional weight of a soap commercial, but somehow takes itself very seriously. People call this arc mature, but slow and sad are not the same thing as deep. The show wants me to feel something, but first it would need to give me a reason to care. This is not subtle writing. This is the anime version of grabbing me by the shoulders and yelling "feel sad now." Every scene feels like it was written to win sympathy points instead of telling a good story. The show keeps mistaking tragedy for quality, as if being depressing automatically makes something good. It does not. The pacing is so slow that I had time to question my life choices while watching it. This arc thinks it is profound, but it is really just exhausting. If this is the best arc in the entire series, then the bar is buried underground. I am not heartless. The writing is just bad. There is a difference. The show acts like it earned these emotional moments when it absolutely did not. This arc feels less like a story and more like emotional homework I did not sign up for. At no point did I feel moved. I mostly felt annoyed and confused. This is the kind of arc people defend by saying you just did not get it. No, I got it. It just was not good. If sadness alone made something great, then this would be a masterpiece. Unfortunately, writing still matters. This arc wants credit for being serious, but seriousness alone does not equal quality. Sad music, long pauses, and characters staring at the floor do not magically turn bad writing into good writing. This show confuses tone with substance. And it has been doing that since day one. People keep calling this arc emotional. No, it is manipulative. It tries to force feelings instead of earning them. It drags scenes out, repeats the same points, and hopes the audience mistakes exhaustion for depth. If I am tired by the end, that does not mean I was moved. It means the pacing was awful. Every emotional moment feels fake. Not because emotions are bad, but because the show never does the work to justify them. The characters talk about pain and grief instead of showing it. They explain their feelings instead of letting them come out naturally. It is all tell, no feel. This arc thinks it is grown up because it slows everything down and adds tragedy. That is not maturity. That is just misery. Real emotional writing trusts the audience. This arc does not. It spells everything out, then spells it out again, just in case you were not sad enough the first time. And let us be honest. If this exact story happened in any other show, people would rip it apart. But because it is labeled the best arc of Sword Art Online, fans bend over backward to defend it. They lower their standards and call it peak fiction. The show also acts like it deserves patience. It does not. When almost nothing happens for long stretches of time, that is not slow burn. That is dead air. Watching characters sit around and talk about their feelings is not compelling when the characters themselves are shallow. This arc feels like it was designed to win arguments online. It feels built to shame critics. Oh, you did not like it. You must be heartless. No, I am not heartless. I just expect competent writing. If this is the arc that finally made people say Sword Art Online is good actually, then that says more about the audience than the show. This is not a hidden gem. This is not misunderstood. This is the same flawed series pretending to be deep for once and hoping nobody notices the cracks. By the end of it, I was not sad, I was annoyed, I was bored, I was counting the minutes. And if that is the emotional payoff everyone keeps praising, then I truly do not get the hype. This is not the redemption arc. This is just another mess, dressed up in sad music and soft lighting, hoping you do not look too closely. And I'm going to look closely. Scene by scene, line by line. Because if this is supposedly the best Sword Art Online has to offer, then tearing it apart is not just fair, it is necessary. If this is the arc that Sword Art Online fans hold dear, then fine. I will tear it apart piece by piece. I will go after every scene, every line of dialogue, and every so-called emotional moment they cherish. Nothing here is sacred. Nothing is off limits. If people built their love for this show on this arc, then I am more than happy to knock the whole thing over and show how flimsy it really is. The arc begins on January 6, 2026, which is also the same day I am uploading this video. That fact alone feels strange. Sword Art Online was once sold as a look into the future. It was supposed to be visionary and ahead of its time. Now the real world has caught up to the date, and what we see instead is how wrong this show always was. There is no sense of progress here. There is no moment where you look around and think this anime understood where technology was going. The full dive tech in this series does not exist in real life, and more importantly, it never could exist in the way the show presents it. The nerve gear and everything built from it ignore basic limits of the human body and the brain. The show acts like you can plug into your head, flip a switch, and suddenly solve decades of medical and tech problems without cost or risk. There is no grounding. There is no care. It is pure wish fantasy dressed up as science. When the world itself is built on nonsense, everything falls apart. The future Sword Art Online imagined has arrived, and instead of feeling smart or bold, it feels lazy and out of touch. The show did not predict anything. It only demonstrated how little effort was put into thinking things through. The characters are shown doing homework inside the game, and it is one of the strangest choices the show makes. Logging into a full dive game just to do homework makes no sense. Homework already exists in the real world. It is boring there, and it would still be boring in a virtual space. The show never gives a good reason for why anyone would choose this. People play games to escape. They play games to do things they cannot do in real life. They want adventure, freedom, and fun. No one logs into a fantasy world so they can sit down and do math problems. It feels like the writers ran out of ideas and filled space with something familiar instead of something meaningful. This choice also hurts the world building. If the game is so advanced and so special, why is it being used like a normal desk and notebook? It makes the virtual world feel pointless. Instead of expanding what games can be, Sword Art Online shrinks them down to the most boring parts of daily life. Another problem is that the characters are even doing homework at all, let alone doing it by hand. In a world with this level of tech, homework should not exist in its current form. The show wants us to believe that artificial intelligence can run entire worlds, manage millions of players, and create quests by pulling from myths and legends across the globe. If that is true, then basic schoolwork should be nothing. The Cardinal system is shown to scrape stories from around the world and turn them into full quests on its own. It can balance gameplay, manage combat, and control a massive virtual space. But suddenly it cannot help with simple math problems. That is not depth. That is bad writing. The rules change only when the plot needs them to. This makes the setting fall apart. Either the system is powerful or it is not. The show cannot have it both ways. When the story ignores its own logic just to force normal school scenes into a game world, it stops feeling believable and starts feeling careless. In real life, students are already using artificial intelligence to solve their math problems for them. Nobody is sitting there grinding through equations by hand for fun anymore. They plug it into an app, get the answer, and move on with their day. So the idea that these characters are logging into a full-dive virtual reality game just to manually do homework is laughable. It is outdated, unrealistic, and completely out of touch with how people actually behave. The show is stuck pretending this is normal when it already feels obsolete. So let me get this straight. This universe has full-dive virtual reality games that connect directly to your brain, simulate pain, taste, sleep, and entire fantasy worlds. But they do not have large language models. That makes no sense at all. You're telling me they solved the hardest problem first, full neural immersion, but somehow stopped short of basic artificial intelligence that can talk, explain things, or solve homework. That is backwards. In the real world, we already have large language models right now, and we do not even have full-dive virtual reality games. It just shows how little thought went into the tech side of the story. The author picks and chooses what technology exists based on convenience, not logic. If artificial intelligence only exists when the plot needs it, and disappears when it would solve problems too easily, then the world is not believable. It is just fake tech held together with duct tape. Silica also falls asleep inside the game, and this raises an obvious question. Why is sleeping even a feature here? Who would log into a game just to sleep? You can already do that in real life for free. There's nothing special or exciting about it, and the show never explains why anyone would want this. This game is sold as the ultimate wish fulfillment fantasy. It is supposed to let players escape reality and live out dreams. Instead, it copies the most boring parts of daily life and calls it immersion. Homework, sitting around, and now sleeping. None of this feels like fantasy. It feels like wasted time. At this point, the virtual world stops being appealing. If the best thing the game offers is doing normal tasks in a fake space, then there is no reason for it to exist at all. The show keeps insisting this world is amazing, but everything it shows is dull nonsense that drains any sense of wonder. Kirito is shown sleeping in the game too, and once again it makes no sense. Why would anyone log into a virtual world just to sleep? He can sleep in real life without any effort. There is no reason for this scene to exist. The show acts like these details make the world feel immersive, but they only make it feel pointless. If the game is supposed to be amazing, it should let players do things they cannot do in reality. Instead, we are shown the most boring, ordinary actions duplicated in a fantasy setting. It does not add depth. It does not add excitement. It only highlights how lazy and inconsistent the writing is. Yui and Pina are sleeping too, but they are just NPCs. They are not even real players. Why do they need to sleep at all? It makes no sense. The show acts like every detail of the game world matters, but clearly it does not. Even the computer-controlled characters are given pointless, boring actions that add nothing to the story. It is another example of how sloppy and lazy the writing is. Instead of focusing on anything meaningful or exciting, the creators fill the world with nonsense just to pretend it is immersive. It is also rude how the other characters talk normally while Kirito is asleep next to them. They do not even bother to whisper or show any awareness of him. It is such a small detail, but it makes the scene feel thoughtless. If the show wanted to feel real, it would have characters behave in a way that makes sense. People do not just chat loudly next to someone who is sleeping nearby. Ignoring this breaks immersion and makes the writing feel careless. It is sloppy attention to detail, and it adds to the growing sense that the show does not think through its own world. They cannot even be bothered to make a new opening song. It is the exact same song as the previous arc, with only minor changes to the visuals. That is how lazy this entire show is. It feels like the creators are just phoning it in. They do not care about giving the audience anything fresh or exciting. Everything is recycled, predictable, and dull. When even the opening is copy and paste, it shows how little effort went into this arc. It is insulting to anyone who expected creativity or imagination. Most of the visuals do not even fit the arc. They are straight up recycled from the previous arc. The animators could not even be bothered to create new visuals for the opening that actually match the story. That is how lazy this show is. It screams, "We are phoning it in," louder than any dialogue ever could. If this is supposed to get viewers hyped for a new arc, it fails spectacularly. It is unimaginative, careless and insulting to anyone who actually paid attention to the previous seasons. What other anime even does this? Most series consistently create new openings for each season or major arc. They do not simply reuse old footage and call it a day. A fresh opening signals to viewers that the story is moving forward, giving fans something to look forward to and get excited about. New visuals and songs are also a key part of the marketing strategy. They can generate buzz, drive sales of singles, and increase streams online. Beyond the commercial side, openings serve an important narrative function. They often reflect the themes, characters, and conflicts of the current arc, helping to set the tone and build anticipation. Reusing old footage not only risks feeling stale, but it could also unintentionally spoil plot points or clash with the current emotional and thematic direction of the story. Essentially, a well-crafted new opening is both a storytelling and promotional tool that keeps the audience engaged and invested. The opening song is sung by the Japanese voice actress of Asuna. That might sound cool if I were a fan of the show. But I am not a fan, so it does not matter at all. It feels like the show is trying to impress people with fan service instead of actually doing something interesting or original. It highlights the problem with this arc. Instead of creating anything new or engaging, the creators rely on familiar faces and voices to carry the illusion of excitement. For anyone who does not already care about the show, it adds nothing and only emphasizes how shallow and lazy the production really is. There's a flashback scene showing Kirito and Asuna on a date in real life. They are at the cafe owned by Egyo. Yet another cafe scene. The show is full of them. Every time the story needs a quiet or romantic moment, it falls back on the same tired location. It feels lazy and unimaginative. The writer cannot seem to think of a new setting or anything interesting for the characters to do. Instead of building the world or adding variety, we get the same bland cafe over and over. It is predictable, boring, and shows how little creativity went into this arc. The funniest part is that Egil himself says there are classier places in town for a date. The show even admits that this cafe is boring, but it does not bother to take the characters anywhere else. It is lazy to the extreme. The writers point out the problem in dialogue but do nothing to fix it. The story refuses to make even the smallest effort to change the setting or make the scene interesting. It is like they rely on the audience to fill in the gaps while they phone it in. It is careless, predictable, and insulting to viewers. Kirito randomly insults the shop Egil owns in the game for no reason. That just comes across as rude. And why are we even wasting time on this pointless dialogue? It feels like the show is only trying to fill space and pad the runtime. There is no story reason for this exchange. It does not develop the characters, advance the plot, or add anything interesting. It is just lazy filler, showing again how careless the writing is and how little thought went into making this arc engaging. It is also uncomfortable that Egil is voiced by a white actor in the English dub. He is the only black main character in the show, and the creators could not even be bothered to hire a black voice actor. That is wrong. It shows a complete lack of care and awareness. Representation is not just about having diverse characters on screen. It is about treating them with respect. Casting a white actor for the only black main character sends a message that the creators do not value authenticity or the experiences of the people they are supposedly representing. It is careless, disrespectful, and inexcusable. Egil mentions that he has played a lot of games and that he even met his wife in a game. She lived in the United States but moved to Japan to run the cafe with him. Okay, but why should anyone care about his backstory? It has nothing to do with the main plot. The show spends time on this for no reason. It feels like filler meant to stretch the runtime instead of telling a meaningful story. Instead of focusing on the characters and conflicts that matter, the audience is stuck listening to pointless exposition. It is slow, boring, and makes the pacing of the arc feel even worse. And why is the cafe called Dicey Cafe? The word dicey means unpredictable and potentially dangerous. That gives it a negative connotation. It makes no sense to name a place where people are supposed to relax something that sounds risky or unsafe. It is like calling a city Troy or naming someone Icarus. The name creates the wrong impression and shows a lack of thought. Small details like this matter, but the show does not seem to care. It is sloppy, careless, and another example of how little attention the creators give to world building. Egil mentions that he and his wife wanted to order 2 nerve gear rigs, but they were only able to pre-order 1. He was the first to test it, which is why he ended up trapped in Sword Art Online. Yet again, why are we wasting time on his backstory? How does this information advance the main plot in any way? Oh right, it does not. It is pointless filler that interrupts the flow of the story. Instead of focusing on the characters and conflicts that actually matter, the show spends time on irrelevant details. It is boring, unnecessary, and highlights how sloppy and padded this arc really is. It is amazing in a bad way how the show rushes through things that actually matter, like boss battles and big moments that should feel exciting. And yet, it has all the time in the world to talk about random and irrelevant stuff. The priorities are completely backwards. The things that should be thrilling and important are treated like an afterthought, while meaningless dialogue and filler get unnecessary attention. It makes the pacing feel uneven, the story feel weak, and the whole arc frustrating to watch. It is careless and shows that the writers do not understand what makes a story engaging. There is a sign in the show advertising 9-Up, which is obviously a ripoff of 7-Up. Why even include this? It does not add anything to the story or the world. It only makes the show feel cheap and lazy. When the creators rely on knockoffs instead of original ideas, it highlights how little effort went into the details. It makes the whole world feel unconvincing and low quality. There's also an Uncle Sam poster telling people to join the United States Army. But we are in Japan right now. Why is this even here? What is the point of this poster? It makes no sense in context. Uncle Sam posters were used to recruit soldiers during World War I and World War II. So why does Aegil think it is a good idea to hang military recruitment propaganda in a quiet cafe in modern Japan? Is this supposed to be funny, cool, quirky? It just feels random and out of place. It is another example of the show throwing in imagery without thinking it through. The poster does not add anything to the scene. It does not fit the location, the culture, or the tone. It is just there. Like the creators grabbed the first recognizable image they could find and slapped it on the wall without asking whether it made sense. Kirito says that getting back home to his family is what kept him alive back in Sword Art Online. That is laughable. He was not close to his family at all after finding out he was adopted. Suddenly, the show tries to make it seem like they were the reason he was fighting so hard. It makes no sense and completely ignores what the story had already established about his relationships. This is lazy character writing. The show rewrites motivations for convenience instead of staying consistent, and it makes Kirito feel shallow and unconvincing. Asuna admits that her relationship with her family is complicated. She was not fighting just to return to them. In fact, there were times when she almost forgot what she was even fighting for. So why does Asuna get to be honest, while the writer had to shoehorn a fake motive for Kirito? It is clear that the story needed Kirito to follow a straight, simple path. It makes him feel less real and more like a plot device. This inconsistency is frustrating, and highlights how poorly the writers handle character development. Asuna feels nuanced, but Kirito just feels forced and shallow. Asuna admits that meeting Kirito is what gave her purpose. He gave her a place that felt more like home than anything she ever had in the real world. Oh my god, the dialogue is so cheesy. The hilarious part is that Kirito and Asuna hated each other at first. The romance makes no sense. They go from enemies to lovers without any real development or explanation. It is obvious that the author has never been in a real relationship and is not writing from experience. The love story feels forced, shallow, and completely unbelievable. It is cringe-inducing rather than heartfelt or touching. The conversation also makes Kirito seem like a messiah. Asuna is presented as if she is in some hopeless situation, completely lost and powerless, and then Kirito swoops in to rescue her. It is ridiculous. He is treated like some perfect, flawless hero who can fix everything, and everyone around him exists only to highlight how amazing he is. Asuna is reduced to a damsel in distress for no reason, and the writing acts like this is somehow inspiring or emotionally satisfying. It is over-the-top, cheesy, and makes the characters feel shallow. The whole dynamic screams author fan service rather than meaningful storytelling. Aegil shows Kirito and Asuna an announcement that new weapons, sword skills, and floors will be unlocked in New Aincrad. If they are supposed to be top players, they should be keeping up with this news themselves. Their surprise makes them look incompetent. In real life, top players are always one step ahead of everyone else. They plan, prepare, and know what is coming. Making Kirito and Asuna act shocked like this only makes them feel less skilled and believable. It is another example of lazy writing that undermines the characters instead of building them up. There's also a Zasker logo in the corner, which is the company that created Gun Gale Online. It has nothing to do with Alfheim Online or New Aincrad. The show cannot even get the basic details of its own story right. I should not be knowing more about the world than the creators themselves. This kind of mistake is embarrassing and makes the whole production feel sloppy and careless. It shows a shocking lack of attention to continuity in world building. Emir is the company that acquired Alfheim Online from Rec Progress, so if any logo should be on screen, it is theirs, not Zasker. The fact that the show puts the Zasker logo there instead is baffling. It is like they forgot the basics of their own universe. How do you mix up the companies that run the games in your story? It is sloppy, inconsistent, and just another example of the writers not bothering to pay attention to the details that actually matter. It makes the whole world feel half-baked and lazy. It would be like putting an Apple logo on a Samsung phone and expecting anyone to take it seriously. It is that ridiculous. Completely careless, confusing, and shows just how little attention the show pays to the rules of its own world. If you're going to build a universe, at least get the basic details right. This is sloppy world building at its finest. Kirito and Asuna are excited to buy the log cabin on floor 22 again, just like they did in Sword Art Online. But why? If they are playing a new game, why would they want to repeat the exact same thing they already did in the previous game? Are there no houses in Alfheim Online they could buy instead? If I am playing a new game, I want to experience new things. I want to explore new locations, try new challenges, and see things I have never seen before. Not the same boring stuff I already did in the previous game. Going back to the exact same log cabin or repeating the same old setting feels lazy and uncreative. The show is clearly just trying to play on nostalgia. It does not care about creating new experiences or making the world feel fresh. Instead, it relies on recycled moments to force an emotional response. It is lazy, unimaginative, and insulting to anyone expecting a story that actually thinks for itself. Being trapped in Sword Art Online should not be a good or happy experience. Why would anyone want to relive that? If it were me, I would want to forget everything and move on with my life, not go back into the game. The show treats this trauma as if it were fun or exciting, and that is completely wrong. It trivializes the danger, fear, and loss the characters experienced. Instead of exploring the real consequences of being trapped in a deadly game, the story turns it into a silly nostalgia trip. It is tone-deaf, lazy, and completely unbelievable. It is funny how Kirito was supposedly suffering from PTSD in the Phantom Bullet arc. And yet here he is, all happy and excited to do the exact same things he went through in Sword Art Online. It shows just how fake and forced his supposed PTSD was. The show pretends he struggled, but then completely ignores it whenever it suits the story. There's no consistency, no depth, and no real understanding of trauma. It makes Kirito feel like a paper-thin character who only exists to follow the plot, not a real person with experiences and consequences. The tone of the show is completely off. Instead of being psychological, tense, and haunting, it treats being trapped in a deadly game as if it is fun and happy. Characters smile, joke, and have cute interactions while supposedly facing life or death stakes. It is absurd. The show wants us to feel suspense and drama, but the tone keeps undercutting itself, making everything feel hollow and ridiculous. It is like trying to scare someone with a ghost story while playing a cheerful jingle in the background. Kirito and Asuna are unsure if the log cabin will even exist since New Aincrad might be different. But this is a flashback scene. We already saw them in the log cabin during the opening scene, so the show kills all the mystery it is attempting to set up. Why even start with that scene if the goal was to make it seem like the log cabin was not guaranteed? It makes no sense. It is sloppy storytelling. The show sets up tension and then immediately destroys it with poor sequencing. It is careless, predictable, and shows how little thought went into the narrative structure. It would be like watching a murder mystery movie and being told who the killer is at the very start. What is the point of that? All the suspense, tension, and intrigue gets completely destroyed before it even begins. That is exactly what the show does with these so-called surprises or revelations. There is no mystery, no build-up, just flat, predictable storytelling pretending to be clever. Oh, and I'm pretty sure the log cabin is where chapter 16.5 took place, which might explain why Kirito and Asuna are so emotionally attached to it. Suddenly, the nostalgia makes a lot more sense. This is not a meaningful location. It is not symbolic. It is just that place. Once you realize that, the over-the-top fondness stops being heartfelt and starts being unintentionally hilarious. They did not even spell Merry Christmas correctly. The ornament has an A instead of an E in Merry and leaves out the R in Christmas. That is lazy and sloppy. Small details like this matter, especially in a show that wants to build a believable world. When the creators cannot get something as simple as spelling right, it makes the production feel careless and unprofessional. It is embarrassing and insulting to the audience. And yes, I know that the visuals in my videos also contain many spelling errors. But that is because I am using a free artificial intelligence program to generate them. I do not have the millions of dollars of budget that this show has, so it is not a fair comparison at all. The show has professional resources, staff, and time to get these basic details right. There is no excuse for such sloppy mistakes. It highlights how little care the creators put into their own production, making the final product feel cheap and unpolished despite the massive budget. This show is just a waste of time and money. All of that effort, all of that budget, all of those people working on it, and this is the result. They could have spent those resources on making something better, something creative, something that actually respects its audience. Instead, we get this. That is the part that is truly sad. Not that the show is bad, but that it did not have to be. This is not a lack of money or talent. This is a lack of care. Watching it feels like watching potential being flushed away episode after episode. And knowing that this is what they chose to make makes it even worse. The studio has made plenty of other awesome shows, which makes this even worse. The fact that this is terrible demonstrates that they simply did not bother. They knew the standards of the fans were so low that they would eat it up anyway. They knew they could phone it in and the fans would still eat it up. It is lazy, cynical, and honestly insulting to anyone who actually cares about good storytelling. We are more than 6.5 minutes into the first episode of this arc. And so far, the show has literally just been characters sitting around and dumping exposition. How does anyone find this exciting or thrilling? I am baffled that anyone genuinely likes this show. There's no action, no tension, and no reason to be invested in what is happening. It is all talking, all filler, and completely boring. The pacing is terrible, and it makes the entire arc feel like a waste of time. If bashing this show was not my job, I would have stopped watching 5 minutes ago. Imagine being an actual fan of Sword Art Online, getting excited for the next episode, and all you get are characters sitting around talking about things that do not even matter. There is nothing to keep you engaged. It is a complete waste of time and shows just how lazy and hollow the storytelling really is. So new Aincrad was added into Alfheim Online. But wait a minute, the characters can fly in this game. So what is stopping them from just flying straight to the top floor from the outside? It makes no sense. The show expects us to accept arbitrary limitations without explanation. The author explained in a tweet that there is a flight limit at the 50th floor. Great, thanks. But why not explain that in the show itself? Viewers should not have to dig through tweets to understand the basic mechanics of the world they are watching. It is lazy, frustrating, and breaks immersion completely. And how is it even legal for them to add Aincrad into this game? Aincrad was created by Keiba Akihiko. It is not in the public domain. It is copyrighted intellectual property. The show completely ignores this and does not address the massive legal implications. It is another example of sloppy world building and the writers not thinking through the consequences of their own story. The inclusion of Aincrad just feels forced and contrived. Even if it were legal, it is lazy from a writing perspective. The author can now just reuse the same settings, the same monsters, and the same old visuals instead of creating something new and interesting. It is a shortcut that saves effort, but completely undermines world building and creativity. Also, Alfheim Online is based on Norse mythology. The stuff in Aincrad does not fit the theme at all. It would be like putting a cowboy saloon in the middle of Asgard or dropping a lightsaber into Valhalla and calling it authentic. It clashes completely with the established world and makes the addition of new Aincrad feel forced, inconsistent, and creatively lazy. Norse mythology is full of awesome gods, monsters, and legendary creatures that could make for incredible bosses and exciting challenges. But instead, the show drags us back to Aincrad. It is like having a buffet full of exotic, delicious food and then deciding to serve plain white rice instead. Completely wasted potential and painfully uncreative. They also got the date completely wrong. It says 2024 instead of 2025. This is such a basic detail, and yet the show cannot even manage that. It is the kind of mistake that makes you question whether anyone on the production team was actually paying attention. If you cannot get the year right, what else are they sloppy about? Continuity, world building, character details, probably all of it. It is careless, amateurish, and frankly embarrassing for a show with this much budget. The characters finally fight a random floor boss, so we get an action scene at last. Too bad it is completely dull and boring. Without the threat of real death, there are no stakes at all. If the players die, they can just respawn and try again. That removes any tension, excitement, or danger from the scene. The show acts like it is thrilling, but it is not. It is empty, repetitive, and fails to make the audience care about what happens. Also, it is absolutely hilarious that we are spending more time in Alfheim Online than in Sword Art Online, the very game the show is named after. You know, the one that gave the series its title, its premise, and supposedly all the excitement. But no, forget that. Let us wander around a fairy world with wings, flying through forests, and do whatever it is people do in Alfheim. It is like calling a movie Jurassic Park and then spending the whole time in a petting zoo. The name promises one thing, and the show delivers something completely different. You cannot help but laugh at how shamelessly it ignores its own title. The entire boss battle makes no sense. The players are just swinging their swords and casting spells at random like they are trying to swat flies. There's no strategy, no teamwork, nothing that resembles a real fight. In a real game, people would have roles, tank, healer, DPS, and they would coordinate. Here, everyone just runs around doing whatever they want, and somehow that is supposed to be exciting. It is like watching a group of toddlers take turns hitting a pinata with a metal rod and pretending it is a legendary dragon. Completely ridiculous, and somehow they call it a boss fight. It is painfully obvious the writer does not play games himself. If he did, this boss fight would actually make sense. Instead, it looks like someone watched a few YouTube videos of RPGs and decided, yes, this is how combat works, then hit copy and paste. Players do not just wander around swinging wildly and hope for the best. They coordinate, they plan, they actually think. But in this scene? Nope. Everyone is just attacking like a confused squirrel on a keyboard, and the show pretends this is epic. It is not epic. It is a joke. A very sad, very lazy joke. Also, Asuna is supposed to be a healer class. She should not be playing DPS. That is not how roles work. You do not just wake up one day and decide your healer is now a damage dealer because the plot needs it. In a real game, roles exist for a reason. Healers heal, DPS does damage. Tanks take hits. If a healer suddenly starts charging in like a glass cannon, they would get deleted in seconds. But, of course, the show ignores all of that because Asuna needs to look cool. Game balance gets thrown out the window so the main character can have a dramatic moment. Once again, rules only exist until they get in the way of looking flashy. Then they magically stop mattering. They also bring back the switch mechanic, where players just swap positions with each other in the middle of combat. Once again, this makes no sense. In a real game, roles would be designed from the start. You do not just randomly hop around like musical chairs and hope it works. But here? Sure, let us pretend that suddenly swapping places mid-boss fight is a genius strategy. It is less tactical gameplay, and more kids playing tag while the boss watches. Completely ridiculous and hilariously lazy. The characters beat the boss and make it to floor 22. Convenient for the animators. Because they can just recycle the same assets from the first season. Efficient, sure. Exciting for the viewers? Not even close. We have already seen this floor many times. Why on earth did the author think it was a good idea to set this in the same place as before? This is supposed to be a new game. A new setting would have been the obvious choice. Instead, we get Groundhog Day, Virtual Floor Edition. It is lazy boring, and makes you wonder if the show is just phoning it in for nostalgia points. It is also funny how they included the lake monster. Of course they do. It is like they ran out of ideas and decided to recycle whatever was lying around. Instead of creating something new, we get the same old monster again, just dragged out of storage and dropped into a different arc. It is nostalgia farming at its laziest. The show keeps leaning on old elements because it cannot be bothered to come up with fresh ones, and it makes the whole experience feel stale and repetitive. Kirito and Asuna buy the log cabin, but like I said before, we already see them in the log cabin in the opening scene. So we literally knew they were going to be successful. Why is the show acting like this is some big moment or grand reveal? It is like watching someone open a gift they already peeked at. The tension is fake. The excitement is fake, and the whole thing is just another lazy attempt to make ordinary events feel dramatic. You cannot help but roll your eyes. Here is yet another animation mistake. The screen says it is the 21st floor, but it is actually the 22nd floor. The show cannot even be bothered to get the most basic details right. It is like the animators were playing a game of close enough and called it a day. You almost have to admire the confidence it takes to mess up something that obvious and still act like nothing is wrong. They also spelled paid wrong. Yes, really. Not a typo in the subtitles or a momentary glitch. Paid. The simplest word imaginable is misspelled. You have to wonder if they are even trying at this point. Is this some new form of avant-garde creative spelling? Or did someone just glance at the screen and think, close enough? It is the little details like this that make the whole show feel lazy, sloppy, and completely unconcerned with quality. If they cannot get the basics right, why should we trust them with anything more complicated? Yui suddenly transforms back into a little girl. How did she do that? She is supposed to be a navigation pixie in this game. It makes zero sense. The writer is just bending the rules whenever it suits the plot, like a kid playing with modeling clay. 1 minute she is a tiny floating artificial intelligence program. The next she is suddenly a human child, and we are supposed to accept it. Consistency, logic, world rules? Who needs those when you can just make things happen because the plot says so? Asuna starts crying because it is so emotional to be back in the log cabin. That is absolutely laughable. Their time in Sword Art Online should have been a nightmare, filled with death and trauma. And yet here she is, overjoyed to return to the exact same cabin. It is like celebrating a vacation to a house that burned down last year. The show completely ignores the consequences of the story it supposedly told and expects us to feel moved. It is ridiculous and unintentionally hilarious. Plus, Asuna is rich in real life and literally lives in a huge mansion. She should not be shedding tears over a tiny log cabin in a video game. It is like watching someone cry over getting a kiddie pool when they already own a water park. The emotional weight the show is trying to sell completely collapses under the absurdity of it. It is over-the-top ridiculous, and makes you wonder if the writer even remembered the real-life situations of the characters. I bet some people actually fell for it and are crying along with Asuna. That is absolutely hilarious to think about. People have such low standards that they are getting teary-eyed over this bad writing. The dialogue is cheesy, the situation makes no sense, and yet somehow it is supposed to feel moving. It is like crying at a commercial for soggy cereal. The whole thing is ridiculous, and the fact that anyone buys it just makes it funnier. We cut back to the present and most of the characters are asleep. The plot is so boring that even the characters themselves cannot stay awake. That is beyond funny. It is like the show is admitting defeat mid-episode. If the people living in this story cannot handle it, why should we? Watching it feels like trying to stay awake in a lecture about paint drying. Absolutely hilarious in the worst way. Asuna says she will make some tea to wake everyone up. But why does tea in the game work exactly like tea in the real world? That makes zero sense. Players can even sleep in the game, which already breaks logic. If they are that tired, why not just log out and go to bed in real life? It is nighttime after all. Tea in a game should not magically replace real sleep. The show is treating the game like a second reality without any rules, and it is funny how seriously it expects us to take it. It is lazy, ridiculous, and completely unnecessary. If tea in the game can actually wake you up, people would just log in, chug virtual tea, and skip real sleep altogether. Imagine the lawsuits waiting to happen from people crashing their real-life lives because of a video game beverage. It is ridiculous how the show treats in-game actions as if they have real-world logic, but then ignores all the consequences. Virtual tea that works like real tea? That is not clever world building. That is just lazy plot convenience with a side of absurdity. Lisbeth tells Asuna about a player named Zekken, and Asuna has no idea who that is. Wait, what? If Zekken is supposed to be one of the best players, how do other top players not know about him? In a real game, the top players are always aware of each other. They compete, they follow each other. They know who is carrying the leaderboard. But here, apparently everyone is blissfully ignorant. And the show expects us to buy it. It is lazy, nonsensical, and makes the whole ranking system feel like a joke. Lisbeth mentions that Zekken means absolute sword, trying to make it sound epic and intimidating. But in real life, Zekken actually means a cloth bib displaying a number of a competitor, like the number an athlete wears in a race. Not exactly the legendary, world-shattering meaning the show is trying to sell. It is like calling your cat Titan, and then finding out it just means fluffy sock. The writers clearly thought it sounded cool without checking what it actually meant, which is both lazy and unintentionally hilarious. The writer is Japanese, so he should know that Zekken actually means something completely different in real life. This is not a language barrier problem or a translation issue. He knew what he was doing. So why on earth would he choose that name for a supposedly epic character? It does not make sense in context. It is like naming a terrifying villain Fluffy Bunny and expecting the audience to take it seriously. It is either lazy, careless, or just straight up ridiculous, and it highlights the sloppy attention to detail of the show. Apparently Asuna did not know about Zekken because she was away in Kyoto at a compound owned by her family. Okay, but that would mean Zekken just appeared out of nowhere. Top players do not work like that. They do not start playing one day and suddenly become the best. In a real game, you rise to the top gradually, earning your skills and reputation over time. But here, Zekken just drops in fully formed, legendary, and mysterious, and the show expects us to nod along. It is lazy, ridiculous, and makes the whole idea of top players feel like a joke. Asuna did not enjoy the trip because she had to wear a kimono and spend all day sitting on her knees greeting people. Talk about first world problems. She sounds like a spoiled brat whining about minor inconveniences while the rest of the world exists. It is hilarious how the show tries to make this feel like a big emotional struggle, when in reality it is just a rich girl whining. You cannot help but roll your eyes. And who even are the random men talking to Asuna? Are they other family members, distant relatives, suitors, or just random people dropped into the scene for no reason? The show does not bother to explain anything that actually matters. But somehow it finds time to waste on pointless, meandering dialogue. It is infuriating. Instead of giving us meaningful context, building tension, or developing the plot, we get filler conversations that accomplish absolutely nothing. The priorities are completely backward. Important story beats are skipped or glossed over, while meaningless chatter takes up screen time. It makes the pacing terrible and the narrative feel hollow. The writers clearly need a lesson in storytelling. Asuna brought her Amusier and wanted to dive into the game at night while everyone else was asleep, but of course, there was no Wi-Fi in the guest house. Too bad for her. But come on, she could have literally just used her phone to create a personal hotspot. It is funny how the show treats this as some huge obstacle, when in real life it would take 5 seconds to fix. Classic lazy plot device. Make a problem out of nothing just to pad the story. It is funny how Asuna is raising her Amusier in the air like that will somehow magically connect it to Wi-Fi. As if the signal is just floating around up there and all she has to do is hold the headset high enough to catch it. And even if that somehow worked, how exactly was she planning to use it? She cannot just stand there holding the headset above her head for hours while playing the game. The scene makes no practical sense and just looks silly. It is another moment where the show treats technology like magic instead of something that follows basic rules. And if the game really requires Wi-Fi to play, then it must be an absolute nightmare to get disconnected mid-game while you are doing something important. Imagine fighting a boss, dueling another player, or climbing a critical floor and then your connection drops. Too bad. Progress is gone. Hope you enjoyed that loading screen. The show never addresses this at all. No lag, no disconnects, no frustration, no consequences. Everything works perfectly all the time because acknowledging real technical problems would ruin the fantasy. In reality, a game this dependent on a constant connection would be infuriating to play, not magical. Asuna says she was sitting on her knees, but the flashback scenes clearly show her standing. The show cannot even stay consistent for 5 seconds. It is like the animators forgot what they were doing mid-scene and just went with it. Continuity? Logic? Who needs that when you can just randomly switch positions and hope no one notices? Absolutely ridiculous. Lisbeth thinks Zekken might have converted from another game, which is why his skill stats are so high. And this just highlights what a terrible mechanic that is. Players could just grind in an easier game, transfer all their stats over, and suddenly be untouchable. Meanwhile, the people who actually put in the time and effort in this game get totally screwed. It is like showing up to a marathon after running a treadmill at home and being crowned the winner. Completely unfair, and yet the show acts like it is fine. Hilariously bad game design logic. The armor in the show looks completely bland and boring. It is supposed to be based on Norse mythology, but it ends up looking more like generic medieval knight armor. The game does not even have a consistent visual identity. It is like the designers threw a bunch of random armor pieces into a blender and called it Norse-inspired. You cannot help but laugh at how unconvincing and uninspired it all looks. The author should not have based this game on Norse mythology if he was just going to change everything and skip the basic research. Norse mythology armor is distinct. It looks nothing like medieval knight armor. But in the show, everyone is decked out in generic shiny metal suits like they just wandered out of a Renaissance fair. It is like calling a pizza authentic Italian and then smothering it in peanut butter. Lazy, inaccurate, and kind of hilarious in its cluelessness. Zekken started by posting a notice seeking strong challengers on an online bulletin board. Why is this even necessary? If the game has player killing zones, just go there and find strong opponents like a normal person. It is like putting up a wanted fighters sign in a boxing gym instead of stepping into the ring. Completely unnecessary, overcomplicated, and overdramatic for no reason. 30 players showed up to challenge Zekken, and every single one of them lost. Not a single person even chipped off more than 30% of his HP. It is hilarious how Kirito is so overpowered that the author has to create even more ridiculously strong characters just to make them look impressive in comparison. In real life, it would be completely unrealistic for one newbie player to defeat 30 experienced players and barely take any damage. The power levels in this show do not make sense. They are completely absurd and laughably inconsistent. It is like watching a superhero cartoon where everyone else is just padding for the ego of the main character. Silica built a snowman for some reason. Did she just watch Frozen and get inspired, or did the animators literally have nothing else for her to do? It is the kind of filler that makes you shake your head and wonder if the show is just phoning it in. Instead of meaningful gameplay, character development, or story, we get snowman building riveting, truly essential content. Silica mentions that it took her 6 months to learn how to fly and fight at the same time. And we are supposed to be impressed? Please, in real life, players would get frustrated after the first day and quit. Nobody would spend 6 months grinding just to hover in the air and swing a sword without crashing. It is not an achievement. It is a nightmare, and the show acts like it is heroic. Completely ridiculous and unintentionally hilarious. Lisbeth and Lifa both took on Zekken, but of course they lost. Big surprise. They are not exactly top-tier players, so that does not tell us anything. Now, if Kirito had taken on Zekken and lost, that would actually mean something. Instead, the show treats these obvious defeats like they are shocking and important. It is like cheering when a toddler fails to lift a weight. They just made it look dramatic for no reason. Totally laughable. It can snow in the game, but of course, the show never explains how it works. Does it match the seasons in real life? Or can it snow in-game even if it is blazing summer outside? The rules of this world are so random that you could literally have a tropical island and a blizzard in the same room, and the show would act like nothing is weird. It is lazily inconsistent and unintentionally hilarious, like someone hit the weather chaos button and called it immersive. The characters sit around and talk while eating and drinking again. Literally 95% of this episode is just that. How can anyone find this exciting or thrilling? It is just endless exposition dumping disguised as a scene. You could replace the characters with mannequins holding cups and it would be basically the same. It is lazy, boring, and somehow the show acts like this is gripping storytelling. It is terrible. Zekken will give an original sword skill to the player who beats him. And of course, this makes zero sense in the game. Everything should be obtainable by everyone. Having a unique, exclusive skill just creates unfairness. It is like giving one kid the cheat codes in a multiplayer game and expecting the rest of the players to clap politely. Completely ridiculous, unfair, and yet the show treats it like a big, exciting reward. Hilariously bad game design logic. The game design in this show falls apart if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. It is painfully obvious the author has no idea how online games actually work. If players can have original sword skills, fights would be completely broken and unbalanced. You would have no idea what you are even up against. Like seriously. What is stopping someone from creating a skill that one hit kills everyone and makes them immune to damage? The rules of the game make zero sense, and the show acts like it is perfectly fair. It is bad logic and lazy world building. Also, it does not even make sense to call them sword skills when there are plenty of other weapons in the game. Daggers, maces, katanas, axes, bows, you name it. It is like calling your fighting game the fist tournament and then letting everyone use nunchucks and guns. Completely inconsistent, hilariously lazy, and yet the show expects us to take it seriously. The terminology alone makes you roll your eyes. It is mentioned that the original sword skill Zekken is offering is an 11-hit combo. Right now, the strongest original sword skill is an 8-hit combo developed by Eugene. Once again, this proves just how broken these original sword skills are. If a player has this legendary 11-hit combo, how is anyone else supposed to stand a chance against them? It is like giving one kid a machine gun in a paintball match and expecting it to be fair. Completely ridiculous, overpowered, and utterly lazy game design. If this were a real game, players would be throwing fits over how unbalanced and unfair it is. Bugs would be reported, forums would explode, and people would rage quit left and right. But in this show, the characters just accept it and actually think it is cool. That is laughable. It is like watching someone clap politely while their pizza is on fire. Completely unrealistic. It is funny how they included Klein in the flashback scene. It is like the show forgot to put him in the present scene, so they just shoehorned him in wherever they could. He shows up, does nothing important, and then disappears again. It is the perfect example of lazy storytelling. We need this character in the scene. Just throw him somewhere, nobody will notice. Completely random, completely pointless, and hilariously obvious. Zekken demoed the original sword skill on the first day, but then never actually used it in any of the fights. So he is so overpowered that he can defeat everyone else without even touching his legendary skill. That makes it even worse from a storytelling perspective. It is basically the show admitting, yep, this character is absurdly strong, and we do not even need the gimmick to prove it. That is not impressive. It is lazy writing. Zekken becomes less of a fearsome rival and more of a walking plot crutch. Hilariously overpowered and completely uninteresting. Zekken beat Leafa using nothing but default skills. And honestly, that says less about how overpowered Zekken is and more about how incompetent Leafa is. If she is losing to someone who is only using the starter moves, then she is clearly not a good fighter. It is like watching a pro chess player destroy a toddler using only the pawns and still call it impressive. Completely ridiculous and embarrassing for her character. Zekken is an imp race and uses a one-handed sword as his main weapon. But here is the thing. Imps come from European folklore, not Norse mythology. So the existence of an imp race in this Norse-inspired game makes zero sense. It is like putting a cowboy in ancient Greece and expecting it to feel natural. Completely random, completely inconsistent, and lazy world building. Zekken is a speed type. Once again, the show is obsessed with speed and reaction time. That is not how real gaming works. In real fights, you win because of skill, strategy, and clever decision-making. Not because your character can move faster than everyone else. It is like watching someone brag that their car is the fastest in a chess tournament. Completely absurd, unrealistic, and just another example of how shallow the show understands games. And if speed is all that matters and everyone knows it, then why do the other players not also create a speed-type character so they can actually go toe-to-toe with Zekken? Instead, they just flail around and somehow act like they have a chance. It makes them look incompetent, clueless, and hilariously bad at the game. It is like watching a bunch of sprinters try to win a marathon by walking in circles. They are doing everything wrong, and the show expects us to take it seriously. It is revealed that Kirito actually fought Zekken and lost spectacularly. Of course, Asuna does not believe it and thinks he was holding back. Naturally, that is exactly what happened. The author would never let Kirito lose fair and square. Whenever someone else beats him, it is always either cheating or he was not going all out. It is sad, pathetic, and predictable. The guy cannot have a real loss without the story bending over backward to protect his ego. The show constantly glorifies Kirito. He cannot just lose a fight normally like any other character would. No, if he loses, it is never because he was outplayed. He must have just let the other person win, or was not trying his hardest. The narrative refuses to treat him like a normal player with real limitations. Every loss is hand-waved away to preserve his perfection. It makes the stakes meaningless and the story predictable, because we know no one can ever legitimately beat him unless the plot demands it. It is lazy writing dressed up as heroism. In real life, even the best players in games are not invincible. They lose fights from time to time, make mistakes, and have off days. No one has a 100% win rate. That is what makes competition exciting and meaningful. But in this show, top players like Kirito are treated as untouchable gods who never lose unless the plot demands it. It removes any sense of tension or realism and turns every fight into a predictable display rather than a challenge. It is unrealistic, boring, and makes the whole world feel unbalanced. Elizabeth mentions that it was just a duel in a normal game, so Kirito has no reason to fight like his life depended on it anymore. But that is total nonsense. If Kirito beat Zekken, he would get the most powerful original sword skill in the game. Surely that is enough motivation to try his hardest. It is also hilarious how the show even acknowledges that the stakes are no longer life or death, like it is waving a little flag and saying, "See, this is safe now." The whole scene feels pointless and absurd, like watching someone sprint in a swimming pool for no reason. Lifa has a different opinion. She thinks Kirito was giving it his all and putting up a good fight, but right before the duel ended, he stops to say something to Zekken. Then they back off, Zekken attacks and Kirito fails to dodge, so that is how he loses. Except Kirito is supposed to have the fastest reaction time in the game. That is literally how he got the dual-wield skill back in the first arc. His reaction time being slow now makes no sense. The writer clearly had to nerf Kirito just to make this new character look overpowered. It is lazy, predictable, and hilariously obvious power level padding. Asuna plans to fight Zekken. She does not think she can win. She is just intrigued and wants to find out why he is really here. It seems like a lazy excuse for the writer to move the plot forward. It would make way more sense if Asuna actually thought she could win and wanted the original sword skill. Right now, she comes across as a completely passive character who just drifts along and does random stuff. It is like watching a player click buttons aimlessly while the story pretends she is making bold choices. It is bad characterization. The other characters will come to cheer Asuna on. Apparently, they would not miss it for anything, which is hilarious. They are nothing more than glorified cheerleaders. They have no agency, no real personalities, and no reason to exist other than to prop up the main characters. It is like the show has a cast of mannequins holding pom-poms while the real story happens elsewhere. Completely ridiculous and lazy writing. Apparently Asuna has an alt account. So this proves that players can indeed make multiple accounts. That opens up so many plot holes in this arc and the previous one. For example, in the Fairy Dance arc, no players could reach the top of the world tree because the different races refused to work together. But with alt accounts, players could just create characters of the other races, team up with themselves, and bypass all that drama. It is like the show invented a rule and then completely ignored it whenever it was inconvenient. Hilariously sloppy and lazy writing. Asuna has to log out to go eat dinner in the real world. It is funny how she acts so surprised. It just makes her seem clueless and overly dramatic about something completely normal. Logging out to eat is not shocking, it is basic common sense. The show treats it like a plot twist, which is unintentionally hilarious and makes her character feel silly. And how is it that tea in the game can wake you up, but food cannot fill your stomach? The characters were literally just eating in-game food, so why does Asuna even need to log out and have dinner in the real world? The details make no sense and are completely inconsistent. It is like the show randomly picks which rules to follow and which to ignore just to create drama. Hilariously sloppy and frustratingly lazy world building. The characters drew a mustache on Kirito while he was sleeping. Why are players even able to do this in the game? It is a total invasion of privacy and would be a harassment nightmare in real life. The show treats it like harmless fun, but in reality this would be a huge problem. Completely absurd, hilariously irresponsible, and just another example of the rules making no sense. If this were a real game, players would just draw inappropriate things on the faces of other players who are sleeping, and that would definitely not be fun for them. You should not be able to do this. The show treats it like a silly prank, but in reality, it would be harassment central. Completely ridiculous, and yet somehow it is supposed to be entertaining. It is nothing but bad game design. Asuna suspects that Zekken might be someone from Sword Art Online, but Kirito does not believe it because the dual-wielding skill would have gone to him instead. That is hardly enough proof. Maybe Zekken was a Sword Art Online player who was inexperienced back then. After all this time playing, they could have gotten much stronger. The show tries to make the reasoning of Kirito sound smart, but it is actually just lazy and dismissive. It ignores any plausible explanation that does not revolve around protecting the ego of Kirito. It is convenient and predictable. And dual wielding is not even the only unique skill in Sword Art Online. It is entirely possible that Zekken was a player and received a different unique skill based on another aspect of their abilities. The show acts like Kirito automatically rules every discussion about skills, but that is lazy and ignores any logical possibilities. It is like writing a mystery and immediately telling the audience who did it before anyone even had a chance to guess. It is convenient and frustratingly dumb. The flashback scene shows Kirito dual-wielding, but his swords are in the wrong hands. The Elucidator is supposed to be in his right hand, while the Dark Repulsor is in his left. The show cannot even keep basic details consistent. It is like watching someone paint by numbers and putting all the colors in the wrong spots. Completely sloppy, completely ridiculous, and hilariously obvious to anyone paying attention. It is funny how they reveal the true identity of Zekken in the opening and the ending. He is not some mysterious legendary man. He is just a little girl. The show is terrified of actually maintaining any sense of mystery. It cannot resist spoiling itself, taking all the suspense and tension out of the story before the audience even has a chance to wonder. Instead of a dramatic reveal or a clever twist, we get the equivalent of someone blurting out the answer to a riddle 5 minutes in. It kills any intrigue and makes the whole thing feel cheap and anticlimactic. And that concludes the first episode. Overall, it is a terrible way to start a new arc. There's so much exposition dumping that it is a miracle anyone can stay awake. The show moves at the pace of a snail on sedatives, and it treats every boring line of dialogue like it is thrilling drama. Completely dull, frustrating, and hilariously bad storytelling. Why is every first episode of a new arc in Sword Art Online always so boring? It is always just characters sitting around and dumping exposition. Nothing exciting ever happens. The first episode is supposed to get people hyped to watch more, not put them to sleep and make them question why they started watching in the first place. It is like the show is actively working against itself, turning potential hype into pure, soul-crushing boredom. Hilariously lazy and painfully predictable. The fact that Sword Art Online never learns from its mistakes is impressive in the worst way. It keeps repeating the same flaws over and over, like a broken record that refuses to skip. Boring first episodes, sloppy world building, overpowered main characters, and endless exposition dumps, rinse and repeat. It is almost admirable how consistently awful it is, if only it were not so painfully frustrating. Is this really supposed to be the best arc in the whole show? Because right now I am at a 0 out of 10. Is going into the negatives allowed? Nothing interesting or exciting has happened. The world building and game mechanics make no sense. The players are incompetent, and the writing is sloppy. There is literally nothing good about it. It is like the show took every bad habit from previous arcs, crammed them into one story and called it entertainment. Completely laughable and painfully boring. If my job was not bashing this show, I would have stopped watching ages ago. Unfortunately, I put myself in this situation, so I have no choice but to keep suffering. I feel like Sisyphus from Greek mythology, endlessly pushing a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down. Watching this show is exactly that pointless, exhausting struggle. And the only difference is that at least Sisyphus did not have to deal with terrible dialogue. But I cannot stop here. I have to keep going. Even though this is completely unbearable. Every great hero is tested, and apparently this is my trial. Odysseus had to face gods, monsters, and the wrath of Poseidon just to get home. Heracles had to complete 12 impossible labors. And me? My destiny is to sit here and tear this absolute dumpster fire apart, episode by episode. Truly, the noblest of quests. I wish this show did not exist. I wish I had never started watching it. But as they said in The Lord of the Rings, I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And with the time that is given to me, I will tear this show apart scene by scene. I will expose every flaw, every plot hole, every broken game mechanic, and every line of dialogue that should have stayed in the first draft. Because someone has to do it. This nonsense cannot be allowed to roam free without consequences. So why not me? No, scratch that. It has to be me. I am the chosen one. The burdened soul. The unwilling hero cursed to watch, analyze, and suffer so that others may be spared. While fans clap and cry over log cabins and team mechanics, I will stand alone in the darkness, armed with sarcasm and common sense, asking the questions the show is too afraid to answer. This is my quest. My trial. My Sisyphean punishment. And I will see it through to the end. I was reading the Reddit thread from when this arc first aired over a decade ago and found a bunch of hilarious comments. Let us go over some of them. For starters, this particular commenter agrees with me about how it is difficult to believe that nobody created the ability to code homework in the game. They point out that in a world with advanced technology and highly skilled players, it seems almost impossible that no one would develop a system to automate assignments or other repetitive tasks. The discussion quickly became funny as other users chimed in with creative and absurd ideas of how players might exploit such a feature, imagining everything from fully automated study bots to elaborate in-game cheating schemes. It was entertaining to see how the community combined skepticism with humor while analyzing a small but amusing detail of the story. This commenter mentions how Kirito and Asuna shared some great memories in that cabin, highlighting the significance of their time together in the story. Other commenters quickly jumped in, humorously exaggerating the experience by stating that it amounted to 2 years' worth of memories. They also referenced a glop glop sound, which is a clear nod to the infamous chapter 16.5. That chapter is widely discussed among fans for its over-the-top and somewhat notorious content, and the glop glop reference has become a running joke in the community. The thread became a mix of genuine nostalgia for the relationship of Kirito and Asuna and playful teasing, with fans blending serious admiration for the characters with a tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement of the more ridiculous moments in the series. This commenter says that it is disappointing that there is no global Wi-Fi in 10 years. Well, buddy, sorry to disappoint you, but it has been over 10 years since you made that comment. And we still do not have global Wi-Fi. The remark sparked a mix of humor and frustration among other users, who pointed out that despite technological advancements, some things still remain frustratingly out of reach. The discussion turned into a playful debate about the pace of real-world innovation, compared to the expectations set by futuristic stories, highlighting how even fans of advanced fictional worlds sometimes have to face the reality that life does not always move as quickly as imagined. This commenter presents a theory that Zekken is actually Kayaba Akihiko. That is hilariously wrong, as the characters and storylines make it clear that such a connection does not exist. Still, the idea is amusing to consider, and it would have been funny if that were actually the case. Fans joked about the potential chaos and confusion it would create in the story, imagining the reactions of other characters and the kind of absurd plot twists that would follow. The thread was filled with playful speculation and humorous exaggeration, showing how fan theories, even when completely off base, can spark laughter and creative discussion within the community. This commenter noticed a drop in the animation quality during certain points of the episode. They pointed out that some scenes seemed less polished, with awkward movement and less attention to detail compared to other episodes. Overall, they felt that the episode was much more mundane and boring than previous installments, lacking the excitement and visual flair that usually keeps viewers engaged. I have to agree with them. This episode felt dull and bland, with pacing that dragged and few memorable moments. Even the actions and expressions of the characters seemed flat, making it difficult to stay invested in the story. It was one of those episodes that might fill time in the arc but did not leave a strong impression on the audience. They also have a theory that Zekken is actually the wife of Aegil. That would actually be interesting, as it could explain why Aegil talks about her so much throughout the series. The idea adds a layer of personal motivation and backstory to his character, which could make his actions more meaningful. However, the theory is ultimately wrong, as there is no evidence in the story to support such a connection. Still, it is fun to see fans come up with creative interpretations and explore what-if scenarios, even when they are completely off the mark. The discussion highlights how engaged the community is, always looking for deeper connections and hidden details in the story. This commenter thinks the show is scraping the bottom of the barrel and questions how the audience is supposed to get emotional about a virtual home. I have to agree with them. It feels as though the series is trying to force sentimentality rather than letting it arise naturally from the story. The episode attempts to manipulate the audience into feeling sad, but these moments are unearned and lack the depth or development needed to make them truly impactful. Instead of creating genuine emotion, the narrative relies on superficial cues and nostalgia, which makes the intended emotional beats feel hollow. It is frustrating as a viewer because the potential for meaningful storytelling is there, but the execution leaves the audience aware that the show is trying too hard rather than letting the story speak for itself. The guy got 5 down votes, but he is right. It is sad to see how some Sword Art Online fans just blindly downvote anyone who criticizes the show. It creates an environment where expressing a negative opinion feels almost forbidden, as if questioning the series is against the rules. This kind of behavior discourages thoughtful discussion and prevents fans from engaging in honest debate about the story, characters, or production quality. Instead of considering differing viewpoints, some fans treat criticism as a personal attack, which stifles conversation and makes the community feel less welcoming. It is unfortunate because constructive criticism can often highlight areas for improvement and lead to deeper appreciation of the series when approached respectfully. The commenter also complained about how Kirito was not fighting seriously, which I already addressed in the video. This has been a recurring point of discussion among fans, as many feel that the constant victories of Kirito make the fights feel predictable or unearned. The concern is that the character rarely faces genuine challenges which can reduce tension and make key battles less exciting. In my video, I explained that this seems to be a storytelling choice rather than a reflection of his skill, but it remains a polarizing aspect of the series. Fans continue to debate whether Kirito holding back enhances the narrative or simply undermines the stakes of the fights. Usually, I like to cover all the episodes in one big video, but there was so much to say about just this one particular episode that I felt it would be better to make individual videos for each episode. This way, I can go over everything in detail and be thorough, giving proper attention to all the points, observations, and fan commentary without rushing through the material. Breaking the arc into separate videos allows for a deeper analysis and ensures that nothing important gets overlooked, which I think will make the content more engaging and informative for viewers. My video criticizing the episode is already many times longer than the actual episode itself. That says it all. You know, there is a serious problem when it takes me such a long time to point out all the flaws, inconsistencies, and ridiculous moments in a show that barely lasted 20-something minutes. The episode is so thin, so padded with meaningless exposition and bad writing, that analyzing it properly takes far longer than watching it. And that is not just a critique, it is a condemnation. If the content cannot even fill its own runtime with anything worthwhile, how are viewers supposed to enjoy it? It is a mess stretched too thin, and my video is the proof. You could just say that I am nitpicking, and technically, you would be right. I am nitpicking, but there is a reason for that. If a story cannot hold up under scrutiny, then it is not good, no matter how many fans try to convince themselves otherwise. Unlike the other delusional fans who hand out praise like candy for the mere fact that something exists, I am not going to give everything a free pass. Just because a series is popular or because it has a loyal fan base does not mean it is above criticism. Bad writing, lazy storytelling, and plot holes still deserve to be called out, and I will not sugarcoat those flaws just to avoid offending anyone. I judge a story by its merits or lack thereof, not by blind fandom or nostalgia. And I make no apologies for pointing out when it falls short. If you are mad at me for pointing out the flaws and speaking the truth, then that is entirely your problem, not mine. The issue is that you base your entire identity on this show and take every bit of criticism as a personal attack. I am not attacking you directly. I am criticizing the story, its writing, and its execution. The fact that you feel personally offended by a simple analysis says far more about your obsession than it does about my opinions. Enjoying a series does not mean you have to defend it blindly, and taking criticism so seriously only highlights how fragile your attachment really is. And if Sword Art Online is really as amazing as the fans claim, then they should not get so rattled by a few critiques. A truly great show would stand up to criticism without its fans spiraling into outrage. The fact that so many people get angry, defensive, or resort to personal attacks over criticism only highlights the insecurity and doubt they really have in their so-called perfect show. It is telling when a series that is supposedly flawless cannot handle even a little scrutiny, and the over-the-top reactions of some fans reveal far more about their own fragile attachment than about the quality of the series itself. Sword Art Online fans really need to grow up and see the world as it actually is. It is one thing to enjoy a show, but it is another to blindly defend it as if it is flawless and take every bit of criticism personally. The reality is that no story is perfect, and pretending otherwise only highlights immaturity and a refusal to engage with the material critically. Fans who cannot separate their enjoyment from objective assessment are setting themselves up for disappointment and are making themselves look ridiculous in the process. The more Sword Art Online fans tell me to stop criticizing the show, the more motivated I am to tear it apart even further purely out of spite. At that point, it stops being about the show itself and becomes about how absurd their reactions are. Watching people lose their minds over criticism is honestly more entertaining than the episode ever was. If pointing out obvious flaws is enough to rustle their jimmies, then that just proves how fragile their attachment is. Instead of shutting down criticism, they are actively encouraging me to dig deeper, analyze harder, and call out even more nonsense just to see how defensive they get. Sword Art Online fans also seem to have never heard of the Streisand effect. The more they try to suppress information or criticism, the more people end up talking about it. Attempting to silence criticism does not make the flaws disappear. It only draws more attention to them and makes the discussion louder. Their overprotectiveness of the show backfires spectacularly, turning minor critiques into hot topics and making their obsession with defending it look even more ridiculous. In trying to protect a fictional world, they only succeed in amplifying the very conversation they are trying to shut down. In fact, the reason I started making Sword Art Online hate videos is because of the fans. They started all of this. Their over-the-top obsession, blind defense of the show, and hostile reactions to any criticism created the environment that made these videos necessary in the first place. It is deeply ironic that they are responsible for creating the very thing they claim to hate so much. Their constant need to defend a flawed series combined with their overreactions essentially fueled the content that mocks and critiques the show, proving that sometimes the fans are even more entertaining than the series itself. The funniest part is that there is literally nothing Sword Art Online fans can do about it. They constantly tell other people to ignore the hate and stop defending the show so aggressively, which conveniently means I am free to keep criticizing it as much as I want. If they truly believed their own advice, they would simply move on and stop reacting. But the moment they speak up to refute what I say, they immediately become hypocrites who cannot even follow their own rules. Either criticism should be ignored or it should be debated honestly. Trying to have it both ways just makes their outrage look performative and unserious. The Sword Art Online fanbase overall is just awful. Their obsession with this dumpster fire of a show is honestly laughable. They defend every bad decision, excuse every plot hole, and act like criticism is some kind of personal attack instead of a normal reaction to bad writing. No matter how broken the story gets, no matter how lazy the animation or sloppy the world building becomes, they will still clap and call it a masterpiece. Standards are buried 6 feet under. At some point, it stops being fandom and starts feeling like denial. Watching people bend over backward to praise this mess is almost more entertaining than the show itself. The reason I am going this hard and tearing this show apart is because of the fans. Their blind devotion, constant excuses, and refusal to accept any criticism make this unavoidable. When people insist that something this sloppy is a masterpiece, it almost invites scrutiny. And honestly, it feels good to dismantle the thing they love so thoroughly. Not out of spite for enjoyment itself, but because bad writing should not be shielded by fandom loyalty. If they're going to praise every flaw and call it genius, then someone has to step in and point out how broken it really is. The sad part is that the fans see me as a bad person. They treat me like the enemy. Like I am some villain for daring to criticize their favorite show, but in reality, I am doing the opposite. I am trying to help people. Time is limited. Nobody gets infinite hours on this planet, and wasting them on garbage like this show is genuinely tragic. There are better stories out there. Better writing. Better worlds. Better characters. If pointing out flaws and warning people away from this mess makes me the bad guy in their eyes, then fine. I would rather be honest than pretend this is worth anyone's time. And honestly, I do not care at all whether Sword Art Online fans like me or not. That ship sailed before it even left the harbor. They never liked me to begin with, so nothing has changed. No loss, no tragedy, no dramatic fallout. If your approval requires me to lie, lower my standards, and clap like a trained seal every time the show repeats the same mistakes, then your approval is worthless to me anyway. I am not here to be liked. I am here to be correct. And if that bothers them, that sounds like a them problem, not a me problem. The Sword Art Online fans really need to grow up and accept a basic fact of reality. People are allowed to have different opinions. Disliking a show does not make someone a bad person, a hater, or some kind of moral villain. It just means they did not like a television show. That is it. That is the crime. There are plenty of people who dislike my favorite shows, and I do not try to silence them. I do not dogpile them. I do not act like their opinion is a personal attack on my identity and everything I stand for. They are allowed to say what they think, just like I am. That is how opinions work. If your enjoyment of a show is so fragile that it collapses the moment someone criticizes it, then the problem is not the critic. The problem is your relationship with the media. A television show is not a sacred text. It does not need defending like a religion. Let people talk. Let people disagree. Maybe learn that the world does not revolve around validating your taste. But Sword Art Online fans will never learn. They will never change. Every year passes, the medium evolves, standards rise, and somehow they are still standing there insisting this is the greatest story ever told by humanity. Not just a good show, not even a personal favorite. No, apparently this is peak fiction, the Mona Lisa of anime, the cultural high point of human civilization. They will keep rewriting reality to protect that belief. Every flaw is secretly genius. Every contradiction is actually deep. Every criticism is dismissed as hate from people who just do not understand the brilliance. It is not bad writing, it is nuance. It is not lazy world building, it is subtle. It is not sloppy characterization, it is complex. At some point, it stops being interpretation and just becomes denial, and that is the funniest part. The show does not even try half as hard to defend itself as the fans do. The writing trips over itself constantly, and instead of admitting that maybe the Emperor has no clothes, the fans start applauding the invisible outfit. They will swear this dumpster fire is actually a masterpiece and look you dead in the eye while doing it. So no, they will never learn. They will never reflect. They will never admit flaws. They will keep acting like this is the greatest show in all of human history, and anyone who disagrees must be wrong, evil, or stupid. At this point, it is less a fandom and more a case study. Stay tuned for the videos on the other episodes in this arc, because I am not stopping here. I am going to tear into every episode piece by piece and break down all the problems they try to gloss over. Nothing is getting a free pass, and nothing is safe from scrutiny. If the first episode was this easy to dismantle, the rest of the arc should be even more fun. So buckle up, because this critique is only just getting started. And after this arc, I will go after the other arcs and the movies in this franchise as well. Nothing is safe. Nothing gets a free pass just because nostalgia demands it or fans insist it is special. I am not stopping here. This is not a one-time event. This is a full tour of the wreckage. Every arc, every movie, every so-called masterpiece is getting the same treatment, the same scrutiny, the same merciless breakdown. If the fans hold it dear, that just makes it more interesting to examine, because the more something is worshipped, the more revealing its flaws become when you actually look at it closely. This is not about being fair. This is about being thorough. I will dismantle the entire franchise piece by piece, expose every lazy shortcut, every recycled idea, every moment where spectacle is used to distract from weak writing. By the end of it, there will be nothing left but what was always there underneath the hype. And honestly, that is the point. And I am not trying to be fair. I am not here to provide a balanced take or a calm, measured analysis. I am not interested in nuance, context, or giving credit where credit is allegedly due. That is not the mission. That was never the mission. I am here to tear Sword Art Online apart. Completely, relentlessly, without mercy. I have nothing but disdain for this show and even less patience for the people who worship it like it is some untouchable sacred text of animation history. It does not deserve fairness. It has already received far more praise than it ever earned. This is not criticism meant to help the show improve. That ship sailed years ago. This is an autopsy. The patient is already dead. I am just here to point out exactly how and why it failed, organ by organ, scene by scene, episode by episode. If that bothers the fans, that is unfortunate but irrelevant. They have had years of echo chambers, excuses, and endless glazing. Now it is time for the opposite. Pure, unfiltered contempt. And I am perfectly comfortable owning that. If the delusional fans are allowed to blindly praise this show like it is the peak of human creativity, then I am allowed to mercilessly destroy it as well. That is how opinions work. You do not get a monopoly on praise while demanding everyone else stay quiet. If one side gets to shout about how this show changed their life, then the other side gets to explain in excruciating detail why it is a narrative disaster. It is only fair to experience both sides of the story. Endless worship without pushback just creates an echo chamber where awfulness gets mistaken for greatness. I am simply balancing the scales. They bring the applause, I bring the receipts. They get emotional speeches about themes and feelings. I get logic, consistency, and basic standards for writing. If they cannot handle that, then the problem is not my criticism. The problem is that their love for the show is so fragile that it collapses the moment someone refuses to clap along. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more Sword Art Online hate videos. Let us keep the criticism burning strong and the standards high. Never settle for bad writing, lazy storytelling, or unearned emotional moments just because a show is popular. If nobody calls these things out, they just keep getting a free pass. So stick around, join the discussion, and help keep the pressure on. Because bad writing deserves to be criticized, not defended blindly.